Welcome to the Ardan Labs podcast. Our special guest today is Zach Wasserman. Zach, we've never met. I don't know you at all. I love these interviews the most because it's really like a blank slate. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Give everybody, just to start off, and myself here, like the 60-second spiel on what Zach is doing today.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a long time open source contributor, and I've kind of built a career in open source. My role today is I'm the tech evangelist and co-founder at a company called Fleet, where we make an open core product that's used for managing computers within organizations from an IT and security perspective, from hundreds of thousands of computers within the organization.
Is that for like a local data center or you're doing that for like cloud computing?
That is for everything. So we do everything from uh, pretty much every kind of workstation folks use. So Mac, Linux, Windows workstations, Chromebooks, and then servers. No more Mac servers, so mostly Linux servers that we're
Mhm.
seeing, which could be within people's physical data centers. More often is our VMs in the cloud. We also do some stuff with containers, Windows servers, and even some OT and IoT kind of stuff like computing devices sitting in factories. So it's all based off of this open source agent that I've worked on for a long time that's cross-platform to Mac, Linux, and Windows, and that kind of allows us to tackle a bunch of different platforms.
Wow. I'm just curious a little bit like what the stack is for like what programming languages are you using for that? What other sort of
Yeah.
tech?
Yeah, for sure. And I know that there's some Go love here in this room. So
Yeah, there is.
we in our server we use Go. So I've been writing Go professionally since 2016 now, I think, or maybe it's 2017. And yeah, we use Go throughout our entire server. It's actually essentially a monolith. And then on the front end, we're using JavaScript, of course. It's a single page application, JavaScript, React, and we ripped out Redux a couple years ago. Yay! Um, so much nicer to see it simpler using all the React hooks and that newer kind of stuff. And then on the agent side, it's a mix of Go and C++ plus plus and a tiny bit of Objective C and C thrown in there where necessary to interact with kind of system APIs that are built on Objective C in the case of Mac OS and C in the case of Linux and Windows.
So I jumped on the browser for so that fleetdm.com. Is that your website or am I in the
That's
wrong
right,
place?
fleetdm.com.
Oh, nice, nice. I love the website actually. If anybody's
Oh, thank
listening
you.
and has a computer, jump on fleetdm.com.
Oh
Um,
yeah, we love our little future space utopia theme.
You know how many times I'll talk to somebody, they'll give me a website and you go on it and you still have 0 clue what they do? Like, I didn't get that from your website, so, uh, kudos on that.
Oh, good. Glad to hear that. And actually, it's an interesting thing. I don't know which version of the website you're getting. So depending on what we know about you, I think you're probably seeing your last MDM migration on there.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, 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 I am.
For some folks, if you're clicking through ads or content that we're producing that's more security oriented, you'll get a much more security oriented experience on that homepage. And that's kind of because our product is targeted both towards security and IT teams who often have a lot of overlap, but also can have some fairly distinct needs. And the same platform does serve both of them, but really the marketing is pretty different.
When I think about device management, my brain immediately goes to, like, schools with the kids getting laptops, and are you doing that kinda stuff too, where you're helping, let's say, my own experience, schools lock down these, laptops and track them and all that sort of good stuff.
Yeah, there's definitely some schools, and I would say more often like universities and with a lot of computers and computer labs and that kind of thing that are using particularly our open source version because hey, it's free and they tend to have pretty low budget. But yeah, absolutely, it's super common for schools to distribute computers these days, and they almost always want to have some management and some visibility into what's going on those computers. So you can totally use our platform for that. I would say that education is not our largest set of customers. It's certainly much more enterprise, but we do have some education customers and plenty of open source users.
From what I heard from you, you're also doing this for like the data center as well, right? The back end data center, which when I start thinking about that kind of stuff, and this is, I'm not an ops guy, Zach. I want to stay so far away from ops. It's not even funny. Okay. My business partner luckily loves ops. I just hate it. So when I think about the back end sort of end of this, I start thinking about tools like, and this is how old school now, like the Puppet tools and that whole genre of Terraform, right, from HashiCorp, and
Oh yeah.
these types of things. So, are is that sort of tooling that you integrate to make your product say easier, or are you sort of also replacing those tools?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that we're a replacement for a Puppet, Chef, Ansible,
Chef.
Terraform, that kind of configuration management system. It's more common on servers that folks, whether it's kind of ops folks or security folks, are deploying Fleet and our agent to get visibility, telemetry off of those systems. And it's not
Oh,
usually really low level like Prometheus kind of metrics on, what's the performance of the server. It's usually higher level kind of stuff. People are interested in things like what processes are running on the system, what software is installed, does that software have vulnerabilities, um, that higher level kind of stuff. But often these tools that are really good at configuration management are not as good at telemetry and visibility. And so often on servers, we see our customers using a Puppet or a Chef for actually actively managing the configuration, and then using Fleet for retrieving the information about what's going on those systems and kind of driving to the insights on what they need to do with those configuration management tools. The story is a little bit
I
different on workstations where we are actually an MDM, which is kind of the de facto way to manage, especially Mac OS devices, because a lot of the things that you want to manage on Mac OS can only be done through MDM. But also on Windows, where MDM is kind of replacing some of the older mechanisms that IT teams use to manage Windows workstations, like group policy objects and that kind of thing. And then on Linux, where there isn't actually an MDM protocol implementation, but we can do things like use our telemetry combined with remote script execution to kind of do some basic management that's equivalent to MDM on Linux.
so two questions before we jump in the time machine. I feel like you also have some aspects of, I'm just companies that I know that I see around, like New Relic. You're doing some stuff that New Relic does too, then, in terms of getting information off those boxes to give you insights.
Yeah, so when I think of New Relic, I'm really thinking of like application performance monitoring. And you can do some of that kind of stuff with our platform, but again, it's usually more of the higher level kind of things. We don't focus much at all on performance. It's much more on kind of security and configuration. So we could tell you that your application's running. We could tell you that your server is about to run out of hard drive space, or that something is using a ton of CPU, but we don't try to compete in that like deep application performance monitoring space.
And then your software, when it's on that machine, also locks it down, so I can't do anything I want to do. Is it also providing that sort of facility?
Not typically on servers. On workstations, it often does do that because these are the kind of things where, again, security and but more typically IT teams really want to be able to do things like lock down the configuration on your MacBook so that no matter what, when your screen goes to sleep, a password needs to be typed in to wake the computer back up. And that's the kind of thing that the MDM protocol allows admins to remotely configure and then users can't change. And so other kinds of things that they often really want to configure are things like make sure the disk encryption is turned on. I mean, both
Mm.
of these things are kind of controls around the laptop gets stolen or is left unattended and could be could be tampered with. But there's also other kinds of configurations that folks want to manage and often keep locked down, particularly if you've still got a physical office you can go to, and there's like certificates that need to be deployed to allow the workstation to connect to Wi Fi. Well, you usually don't want end users to actually be able to tamper with that because you get more people visiting the help desk saying, I can't connect to Wi Fi anymore. And it's because, like, hey, they were trying to debug something and they deleted that certificate or that Wi-Fi configuration, that kind of thing. So locking down configurations is something that's done, but we don't typically see folks using this to kind of reduce the effective access that folks have on machines. Typically, everyone still works as an admin on their Mac computer or with a an account they can get root, and there's just like a small set of things that are enforced in this way, and then there are other things that are evaluated and shown to the end user, like, hey, you've installed some things that have vulnerabilities on them, or you're out of compliance with some organizational policies of things that we haven't locked down, but we'd ask you to fix them.
See, that's the new thing this year. I've had 2 clients that have now required my machine to be in compliance. One of them, I had to run this Drata or something like,
Oh, yeah.
Drata thing, and, I had to report back that, I did all these things like encrypt disk, and, like, this is a new thing that I'm seeing. I don't know if I guess these companies want some sort of certification, but it sounds like you can also help with that since you're on the machine and you can validate.
Yeah, for sure. And we do, so Drata, to my understanding, is really focused on the like SOC 2 Type 2 compliance and the other compliance
SOC 2.
frameworks,
Yeah, yeah,
which
that
are
that was it.
becoming super important. Like, I can tell you, as someone who sells SaaS software, you can't deal with any organization who of a size greater than, say, 50 or 100 employees. You can't sell them cloud services or SaaS software if you don't have that SOC 2 Type 2 certification, and that's going to require that you have management software on these computers that can configure things like you described, like the disk encryption, the screen lock, the that software updates are turned on for the operating system and for the browser and that kind of thing. Some of this really low hanging security fruit ends up being required by those compliance frameworks, and the compliance frameworks end up being required just by the need to do business with organizations that demand them.
Yeah, it's and everybody's gonna hear me say this and say shame on Bill. I never bothered to turn on, disk encryption because all my stuff was in the cloud anyway, and I never thought to do it, and now I had to be this SOC 2 compliant, and I turned it on. Obviously, you don't feel it, like, it wasn't a performance issue, but it was never something in the forefront of my mind like, "Okay, somebody gets my laptop, what do I have on there? A picture of me," and that's, like, about it, man. You know? I guess I got some keys for GitHub, right, for SSH and, stuff like that, but,
Yeah, and that kind of
uh
thing can start to matter. And then it's like, oh, maybe you realize I've got a database dump from production that I was using to debug something. And here and there, the pieces add up, and I think you can start to see why the compliance frameworks require this kind of thing, especially when it actually is so low touch to users. So it's been some years now, for example, that a Mac OS device has a specific hardware built into the processor that enables it to encrypt and decrypt data as it goes from the processor to the SSD. And so we really see actually no performance impact, or very little performance impact from doing that kind of thing. And yet Apple hasn't yet figured out, I guess, and this one's kind of baffling to me, but Apple hasn't yet figured out how to make it so that this is just turned on always. Like, we still find cases where machines, even when they're attempted to be configured that way, sometimes are not. And so that's one of the big things that our platform does, as well as, like, you've got a lot of these MDM kind of systems where it allows admins to configure things, but the visibility is lacking. So you actually don't know when the machine failed to configure something that you attempted to configure. That's kind of one of our big selling points, where we go, well, we can configure it, but we can also verify it with this kind of other mechanism, the agent that we have running. So not only did the system confirm that it got the config, but actually that config is live. And that's something that we are working on and doing already, and that our customers kind of appreciate.
I mean, but I can tell you this right now that if one of these clients told me I have to run an agent in the background, right? I'd be like, it would bother me. It would scare me. I came from 20 years working on Windows. I'm on a Mac for the last 10 years, right? The first thing you do when you get a new Windows machine is what? I redo the OS just to get rid of everything that's running, right? Like, you just have this horrific experience. And then the thought of you telling me I have to run this agent that's running in the background, eating up God knows what,
Yeah,
it freaks me out, man.
yeah, for sure. And that's understandable, because we have had just all this crap installed on our systems, either, by Microsoft, or by folks who are paying the OEM vendors to get their crap installed, or by our own, well, hopefully well-meaning, and usually well-meaning IT and security departments. Or no, I'm going to say always well-meaning. These are just other people within the organization who want to see things go effective. Now, their idea of well-meaning may be different than your idea of having a computer that is nice for you to work on. But that's something that we've really focused on, again, both in the open source community with the agent. Osquery is sort of the underlying agent that we use at Fleet, as well as in the work that we do at Fleet. So there's a couple of things that we try to do to alleviate these kinds of concerns. One is, the agent is open source, so we're not doing sneaky stuff. You can go read the code if you want to understand everything that the agent does. And then we have
Except
a
I'm
user.
trusting you. I'm still trusting you that that's the open source you used to deploy the binary on my machine because I'm not building it myself.
That is true, but you could build it yourself and compare the hash or that kind of thing if you want. If you're that keen. I find that folks don't, I would say. I find that folks don't. So there is a level of trust here. And in order to build that trust, we also try to do things like expose to the end user. Like, we've got a little thing that sits in your menu bar, where you can click in and you can see which of these policies are being evaluated on your device. And you can see all the information that we have collected and are collecting on your device. And so, yes, trust is required there, but we think that, like, getting more transparent communication with the end users of these devices does help build trust between the security and IT teams that deploy this, and the end users. And then on the performance side, which has often been a big consideration, many folks have experienced agents that are quarantining the software that they're building, or they're causing performance slowdowns or crashes of the system overall. So that's also been a big focus on the agent side, is like, this thing is sort of self-contained from a performance perspective. It actually runs with this, like, worker and watcher process model, where the watcher will kill the worker process if it's using too many resources. And this is the kind of thing that allows it to get trust to be deployed, not only on workstations, where for sure there are humans that are sensitive to that, but as we know, there's been a lot of painful software deployed on those. But also in production, where like the money is typically directly being generated in organizations. So yeah, I mean, these are real challenges there, and ones that like require ongoing work and ongoing building of trust with the end users, but also things that we're doing really well on that enable us to get into production, get into workstations, and
Uh,
in both organizations that are really large and just are sensitive because of the incremental cost of 1 or 2 or 5% of CPU in their production data centers, and organizations where they really value the user experience of their engineers and everyone else in the organization who works on these computers.
So, Zach, if I was you, I would force every employee to have to run this agent on their machine
So
to dog food it.
Yeah, and we absolutely do that within our organization. We dog food our product extensively. We use it as part of our SOC 2 certification. So we don't use Drata, we use Vanta, but they're very very similar, and they get us the same compliance sort of check mark at the end. But yeah, absolutely, every one of our employees has a computer that's managed by Fleet, and that's important for us to figure out how is it working, and especially how is it not working, and what sorts of user experience problems are folks encountering, so that we can address those and make sure that our customers, these IT and security teams, don't hear the same complaints or concerns from the folks in their organization.
There was a book published in '94. I want to say it's called Showstopper, but I don't remember. Where the NT team, the when Microsoft decided to write the NTOS, in the book they talk about how the operating system engineers had to dev on the same OS they were building to make sure that it was working. And like there were times where the drivers would fail for disk and they'd lose stuff. And it was the only way to make sure that they were going to fix bugs because they had to live on
Now that sounds painful. Wow. Like I
it.
just can't imagine writing code and knowing that's buggy because we haven't shipped yet, and knowing that I'm gonna experience the pain of data loss and that kind of thing. That is just brutal.
But it's going to make you, I would think, make you work extra hard to add that reliability since you had to rely on it first. I always loved that story. So the idea of dog fooding, especially with something like what you're talking about, is critical to me because if there's a performance pain there, especially on Windows, right? It freezes the machine. It does this. It does that. It's not playing nice with Norton, which is installed on every damn Windows machine, which causes all other sorts of pain, right? Like, hopefully you'll know about it. Like you have to have some level of developers even on Windows over there to experience that, which is
Oh yeah,
probably
for
rare.
sure we do. We're on pretty much every platform you could imagine, at least in virtual machines testing these things out, but we've also got folks within our organization who are working on Windows and working on Mac OS and a tiny bit of Linux, even Linux on the workstation. But that kind of represents what a typical customer of ours looks like these days. I mean, it's usually yeah, our customers usually range from let's say 75% Windows, 20% Mac, 5% Linux or less,
Yeah. Yeah.
to sort of the opposite of that, 75% Mac, 20% Windows, and 5% Linux. But these are really common. And then that you've got that long tail of Linux where those 5% of users who are on Linux, if it's allowed by organizational policies, are on probably 10 plus different distros and versions, and so the complexity just grows there. But we work with these IT teams within large organizations who want to support Linux on the workstation, and in particular I think it's because some really influential people within the organizations demand that, because some of the kind of most key engineers say, we demand to be able to work on our Debian or whatever it is that they like to use.
Yeah, there's a lot of flavors out there. So, and experimental flavors and I always say I'm on a Mac. I said the moment I can't afford the Mac anymore, yeah, I'm just gonna go buy a Chromebook and just wipe it down and run Linux on it. No more Windows, man. My life got so much better when I took Windows. In fact, you're the computer person, so your family calls you up to fix things. Dude, I got rid of every Window machine from every family member and put them on Chromebooks at some point,
Oh, you
and my
put the
life
family
got
on
better.
Chromebooks. That's great. Yeah, and we see organizations where they can also putting people on Chromebooks, and we're not talking like Linux on a Chromebook, talking Chrome OS here,
Yeah.
which is great for security and for IT because these things are such commodity. They have so little running on them. If you have work that people can do that's all in the web browser, this is just awesome. And there's pretty good management coming from Google, remote management of the Chromebooks. And then, like I said, we also have something that's effectively a Chrome extension that helps to get some of this visibility and telemetry that organizations need for their compliance and for their internal security controls. So between kind of Google's active management and our telemetry and visibility, folks can realistically use Chrome OS for a lot of tasks, and it just works wonders, I think.
Oh, no, no. It saved my life when the kids were young because all I was doing every week was rebuilding machines. It saved my life with my uncle when it was just no, you have no idea, dude. I love the whole Chrome thing. And look, everything on schools and browsers now, unless you're doing software dev, really, maybe some accounting because you want to run QuickBooks locally because you don't trust your financials being in the cloud, right? Like, um, I don't know what else you necessarily need. And you're a gamer, obviously, but that's on another genre of person, right? So, I mean, beyond those three things in my lifetime, I don't know why the Chromebook isn't all you need.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wouldn't be surprised if we're heading that way. And that is really, we talked about education, and that is really common in schools. Like they mostly, they can put these kids on Google Docs or Office 365, that kind of thing. And they can learn how to do everything in the browser. And I think you can even do, especially with some of these newer services like Gitpod and GitHub workspaces, I think they call it, or code
Yeah, now
spaces.
you,
You
yeah.
can do a lot of development in the cloud. Now, for sure, that doesn't work for my workflows. It's hard for me to imagine giving up like a full desktop operating system anytime soon. But I do think that there's incredible potential for a lot of folks to have better experiences through essentially like browser only devices.
Well, even GitHub, I don't remember what the keystroke is, but it will bring up VS Code, right, for that repo. And from a training and a class workshop perspective, when you need that, it's game over. Like, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
But even early on, when the kids were in school, even 15 years ago, that's when and they were screaming, "Dad, we have to do this." And so Google Docs does it all. I don't want to hear it. You know, they were like, "We have to be on Word." I said, "No, you don't. You can be on Google Docs." Dad, we need a PDF. Here it is.
Yeah,
Right.
print a PDF right there. It's perfect.
And that was years. Okay, look, we've already talked for a half an hour, which I never do because this podcast is supposed to be about you and sort of your journey getting over to Fleet. But this is signing some new tooling, so I think I allowed myself to get distracted. So we're going to jump in the time machine now, Zach. We've got to do that. And so a couple of questions up front. What year did you graduate high school, and where on the planet were you living at that time?
Yeah, I graduated high school in 2008 in Berkeley, California, so in the Bay Area, right across the bay from San Francisco.
This is one of my favorite questions that I love to ask guests, especially those that are as technical as you are. Clear your mind, clear it. No thoughts in your head right now. Go Zen. First thought pops in your head of you touching a keyboard, a computer, hands on that keyboard. First thought. Don't work it. Just first
We
thought.
talking like my first memory?
Yeah, yeah. Your first memory
Oh
of
yeah.
of a
My
computer.
first big memory is with my dad hooking up, like, I think he'd gone to the brick and mortar computer store and he'd gotten a new graphics card. Maybe I went with him, but I don't remember that part. What I remember is can open up the tower computer case and connecting the new graphics card, and then taking our VHS camcorder and connecting that to the new graphics card because it had some sort of probably very bulky serial plug, or I don't even know, some sort of plug that allowed us to hook up that camcorder, and then dialing up our internet and getting onto some website that was effectively chat roulette that allowed us to talk to strangers online at, if I remember, 1 or 2 frames per second at a 320 pixel resolution, or maybe less than that. But just being kind of mind blown by this whole hardware through software through internet experience.
That had to be at least 96, 97, 98. The first time I ever saw the internet was probably 1995, where I walked into somebody's office and I'm like, "What are you doing?" Because the noises and stuff. Like, I'm getting on the internet. I'm like, "What the hell is that?" "Oh, you don't know what that is?" And that's like 95, man. So how old do you think you were around, like, how old do you think you were when that happened?
It had to have been late 90s. I think, yeah, probably 90, 97, 98,
What
maybe
did your dad
99.
what did your dad do that he had that technical, experience already?
He was just a bit of an enthusiast. Like, he worked in legal publishing. They were using computers. I don't think they were building products for the internet yet at that time. They were certainly using computers in their work, but I think we're probably talking more floppy disk kind of stuff, and they were, yeah, and probably CD-ROMs. They were probably shipping people like CD-ROMs full of legal documents and that kind of stuff, if I were to guess. So I don't know really. I think that he just found some of this technical stuff fascinating, and he liked to check out gadgets. And I don't know how he would have found out that you could hook up the camera and that kind of stuff, but somehow he did, and
Is your
we
father
dug
still
in.
alive? Is your
He
father
is,
still
yeah.
alive? So now you have to ask him this, over the weekend.
How?
See if
How
he
did
even
this happen?
remembers. Yeah, 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 Dad. I'm curious. I had this thought, Dad. So how did you know that? I wonder if he even still has that memory. Like, it's an important memory to you,
Yes.
but I wonder if, like, it was significant enough for him to remember.
That is a really interesting thought. Yeah, I do wonder. It could have just been like sort of another in a chain of gadgets that he was trying out for him. But yeah, for me it is this really significant memory.
Do you have siblings?
I have a half sister who's about 14 years older than me, so I grew up a bit like an only child. By the time we were hooking up the camcorder, I was the only kid in the house.
Now that this computer is in the house, is this something that you had free reign to sort of play with? Did you have to get permission, or you just really weren't interested unless Dad was hanging out with you?
That's a good question. I don't have memories really from that time, so much. But I did get free reign to some extent. We had I think that must have been a Windows computer. That must have been a Windows 95 or Windows 98 or something. We also had a Mac computer, and I remember Kid Pix. Not sure if anyone listening is familiar with that. It was like Photoshop or Illustrator for children, and I do remember that I would get free reign there, and it had, you could draw and use stamps and that kind of stuff, and I remember having free reign around that kind of thing. But besides for some of those really early memories, what I later remember was when I was in high school and I got a computer in my room, and that was
Mm.
exciting, and the screen
Uh,
had to be facing towards the door, and the door open for me to use it because my parents wanted to be able to
So
supervise.
it's a good transition because I wanted to talk about high school. But was this a hand me down because your dad got a new one, or is this here, son? I just got you this computer and it's all yours.
That's a good question. I don't remember.
But you do remember being excited that you now had your own
Oh, yes,
machine in there.
having my own, not having to kind of share with my parents, for sure, that was great.
But at this point, it's like 2004, so we have regular internet at this point. It's not dial-up anymore, right?
Oh,
You've
yeah, this is like
transitioned.
cable internet, World of
Yeah.
Warcraft is around, that kind of thing. I checked it out, I don't think it really captured my attention that much, but MMORPGs was like an exciting thing, and yeah, the internet has really taken off. The dot coms have boomed and busted already.
And, you have your IRC handle and you're spending a lot of time talking to people.
AIM for me.
AIM. Okay, okay, that's fair, that's fair. It's amazing to me, that's America Online, right? Like, it was amazing to me what they built so early on, and they even held on to it. I still I still occasionally see an email address with,
The
like
AOL.com email address. Yeah.
yeah, um, and I always found it fascinating. I stayed away from it for whatever reason. I felt like it was I don't wanna say toy. I didn't there was something I had a bias against American Online for some reason. I don't know because it was pretty, it was so graphical. I cannot tell you, but I stayed away from it, but they at least held reign for 20 something years. I don't know what finally did them in, but
Oh yeah, it was an amazing thing for sure. Like they used to send those CDs in the mail, like put the CD in and hook up your phone line and you can get connected to the internet. And yeah, I mean, and this was even, in the mid 2000s when I was using the AOL Instant Messenger, like we weren't on AOL internet. But it's just like the AIM was where the teenagers were at in my area.
yeah, yeah, it's cool. So let's talk about high school a little bit because you got this computer, you're really using it for gaming and talking and all that sort of makes sense. It's a social sort of thing, tool for you. But what else is going on in high school? Are there other interests going on? Sports, music,
In high
what?
school, I was always like a skater kid. I
Okay.
probably started 6 years old or something on the skateboard, cruising around in front of my parents' house. And by high school, it was like going all over town and all over the Bay Area on public transit to go skateboard in different places.
I mean, that's a
And
California thing.
oh
Like, I
yeah,
grew up in New
totally.
York. I mean, I'm not saying it's not New York, but yeah, like the Dogstown movie when I see that, right? That's what I'm thinking about you now in swimming pools, man.
Oh, yeah, and, that was more Southern California, the swimming pools, but we were everywhere we could possibly be, and, and thinking back to some of that early stuff, like, I got my first video game console, it was a PlayStation, and got the original Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, and that was, I think, around the time when I was first getting into skateboarding, and that was, like, really influential to me, and I still remember with nostalgia, like the songs are on the soundtrack for that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Like I saw a little, uh, I think I saw a little meme on Instagram, like, "Oh, you're born in the '90s? How about this? How about this song?" And it's like something from the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater soundtrack. So that kind of stuff was going on big for me, but it was also getting more into the tech because it was also in high school when I was lucky enough to have a programming class at my high school, and I got to actually learn. And I had actually wanted to learn for a long time. Several years before high school, probably fourth or fifth grade for me. I first tried to learn programming, and as fate would have it, picked up a Perl programming book at Barnes and Noble or whatever our like chain bookshop was at the time, and that was not the right language for a 9-year-old kid or something to learn how to write games. Turns out, surprise, surprise.
Man, I'm surprised you didn't use BASIC. Like, my first programming language was a CPM Kpro 2 machine that had BASIC on it, and I just like, that's all I did almost. If I wasn't outside playing sports, I was coding BASIC.
If I had known any better, like I would have, I guess, but I just didn't know. My parents didn't know. Like like we said, my dad was into gadgets, but he didn't know anything about programming. And I think that they probably took me to the bookstore and we read the back cover of the book, and it said like Perl is, the best programming language to learn because it's so powerful. And I was probably like, oh, great.
Yeah, but you didn't have that continuity with it, I guess, whatever the word is. So
No, I did not last long at all, and it wasn't until getting to high school and learning in a classroom computer lab, we did a little bit of C++, plus plus, which again I wouldn't advise, but with the structure it helped, and then they switched to Java at that time after my first year of high school, so we started doing Java as well, um, and I was getting more into the programming stuff. And again, kind of lucky and in place and time. I grew up in Berkeley, and a friend of mine from the computer lab ended up getting us involved with some undergraduate research at UC Berkeley, where we got to implement a board game in C and use their system that would sort of traverse the tree of all possible moves and figure out all the possible outcomes of the game so that the computer could play perfectly. And I got to fumble my way through some C programming for that, and I had no idea what the ampersands and the asterisks meant. Um, but lots
but
and lots
that
of fumbling later kind of got it done.
but that what you just talked about being able to do some things at the university, was that connected to your high school? Was that extracurricular? Was that like
That was
explain that?
extracurricular. That was like, I don't know how my friend who I had started taking the programming classes with at high school, he had somehow found out about this thing. I think it was his mom maybe had found out about this thing, and he said like, "Hey, let's go check this out." And it was just growing up in Berkeley, like we could just walk up there to the UC Berkeley campus where this professor was having weekly meetings with the undergrads who wanted to participate in this thing, and we just kind of walked in and they welcomed us.
That's amazing. Like you look back on it now, you realize how special that is. But I'm sure in the moment, you're just you're punk teenagers, man. You're just walking in, you
Oh
don't
yeah.
realize it.
Oh yeah, for sure. We had no idea. We didn't get it. And but we were just I think we were just really lucky that that professor Dan Garcia and the group was called Games Crafters, and I think that Dan's still doing that at Berkeley. They're still doing like board game related stuff. But yeah, they welcomed us in, and I was definitely riding my skateboard to and from that. So I really was like a little punk teenager, and my friend who'd invited me to do that after a little while went like, "Oh, this computer stuff is like too nerdy. It's not cool," and he bailed. But surprise, surprise, got back into tech again later, so he couldn't escape it completely. But for me, it just was fascinating. It was cool to see, these people who were 4 or 5 years older than me and really had uh, started gaining some real skills, and what they could do with computers was really inspiring for me.
I'm kind of curious as you're evolving through high school. Like, where's your head at in terms of what you're going to be doing, sort of next? Is computers like out in front? Is taking a year off and skating all around the country? I mean, like in all honesty, like where's Zach's head going into being a 17, 18-year old?
It actually was exactly both of those. I was like, I'm gonna go to university and study computer science. Um, and I also was like, I'm gonna take a year off and go travel, and I did. I worked at summer camp, and then I did a course at the National Outdoor Leadership School, and this was a time when I was kind of transitioning from, urban skater kid to more outdoors in nature oriented activities, which is kind of now my main extracurricular is rock climbing and mountain biking and that kind of stuff. So I did that, and I also traveled to India, and so yeah, it really was both. It was like I know that my future I want to be in tech in I don't even know if I knew the name software engineering really at that time, and I don't think I really even had a great idea of what it would be like to do that, but I just knew that working with computers was what I needed to
See,
do.
but you're a kid in a time where you're expected to go to college, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
we're in this world. So if you're telling me I'm going to take a year off, my brain goes, no, you're not going to sit and veg for the next 12 months until you decide that you're ready it doesn't sound like you were being unproductive, but what were your parents' thoughts when you just say, I'm not going to university right now? Because you could promise it all day long, Zach. I don't really care. But um,
My parents are really awesome, and they had wildly divergent paths. Like my mom graduated from high school a semester early and went straight to UC Berkeley. Like, and this is in the late 60s. Went straight to UC Berkeley, early, and my dad dropped out of high school and ended up kind of going back to school 6 to 10 years later or something like that. And both
mm.
of them ended up with law degrees. So I think they must have seen, and we are also just in a place, Berkeley, California, where people don't do things quite the traditional way. And I think that my parents just saw that there's not one path for things, and I was lucky enough that they kind of instilled me with that belief as well, and they supported me in making decisions that really align with my values.
But there had to be rules. So you're not going to sit on the couch and play games and skateboard every day. So what were the rules, Zach, for you to take a year off?
Well, I think I told them what I wanted to do, which was to I wanted to work at camp, and I wanted to travel. And a friend of mine had just done it. A friend who was 1 year older had gone and traveled in South America and worked. And so I don't remember what the rules were. But
But you
yeah, it
needed
was
money,
probably that kind
Zach.
of stuff.
Zach, I'm not paying for this. So you can do whatever you want for the next 12 months, Zach. But I'm not paying for this. Okay. So how does Zach pay to go to India of all places? Because
Well,
I've been
India.
there a handful of times. And I mean, that's an experience, dude.
Oh yeah, I think what happened was my plan was I'm gonna work at camp, and then I'm probably gonna go to South America because I'd been studying Spanish in school, and
Oh, so you're going to
and
save money. You're going to work at camp,
yeah,
which lets you kind of goofball it a little bit. Your
yes,
skateboarding, your outdoorsy stuff,
yeah,
hanging out with cool kids. You're going to do that. You're going to generate enough money. I don't know, 5 grand, whatever you think
yeah,
you need. And then, so that's like what, the first 3 or 4 months, 6 months.
uh-huh, yeah.
And then the next 6 months, I'm going to take that 5 grand
And I'm
and
gonna go somewhere really cheap
okay.
and make the money stretch. And so what happened was I worked at camp, and then I don't know how I'd gotten this idea, but had decided I wanted to do this course with the National Outdoor Leadership School, Knowles, where we'll do some backpacking and some rock climbing. And at that point, I had never rock climbed before, but I wanted to try it. And we'll do some canoeing and all that kind of stuff. And I had convinced my parents, like, hey, this thing has school in the name. Like, maybe you can help me pay for it. Um, and generously they did. And while I was on that course, my one of my instructors was from India, and he said, oh, you're thinking of going traveling, like, you should come to India. You can live on $5 a day comfortably, and I can connect you with some people there. If I'm there, we can hang out. I'll tell you where to go rock climbing, and you can ride the trains everywhere, and it's great. And I think I basically said I've always been a person who kind of likes to embrace opportunity when it comes up. Um, and that might be one of the earliest examples of like really kind of embracing opportunity. And I said sure. Yeah, I was gonna go to South America, but might as well go to India.
Were you nervous
And
at all? Because it's a really different world. Plus,
oh, I
I don't
did
know.
not know what I was getting into.
Yeah,
I showed
ignorance is
up.
bliss. I
Yes,
say it all the time.
yes. To be honest, I'm not sure I was nervous when I left, but I'll tell you, I got to Delhi. I flew from San Francisco to Chicago and Chicago to Delhi, and I got to Delhi and I checked into my hotel, let's say. I mean, hostels weren't really a thing there because you get a private room. It was dingy. You get a private room for like $2 a night. So I checked into my hotel in Delhi, and there I am, like 18. Uh, and I've traveled before with my parents and stuff, but never to somewhere as different as India and on my own like that. And I remember sitting there awake with the jet lag, 12-hour time difference, and thinking, what have I got myself into?
I think the other interesting thing here, since you have zero experience, is you really have to navigate what you're eating and drinking there. You cannot be eating in the street cafes unless you know they're using bottled water, which I imagine somebody has told you this, but it's easy to blow it off. So, what are you doing for
Yeah.
food and water?
Yeah. I mean, I had done some research, and my mom, who's a bit more of a worrier, had also done a lot of research, and somehow had come up with the plan of trying to eat mostly vegetarian, which I think was really good. Um, but I was keen to eat in the street. Like eating in the street is what I love to do. Anywhere I go, I was eager to eat in the street, and mostly it actually was fine. I was there for 3 months and it was mostly fine. I think eating vegetarian works really well, and drinking a lot of sodas, drinking a lot of bottled sodas, and eating only hot cooked vegetarian food. It worked out well, but yeah, certainly like India is just wildly different from the U.S. and the whole experience was pretty eye-opening for me.
I mean, I grew up in New York City essentially, and I can predict everything that goes on around me. So I feel very safe in New York City, even with what people would call chaos. But when you get into Pune or Bangalore or New Delhi, the level of chaos is 10 times that. And I couldn't predict a single thing to the point I got so exhausted, I couldn't be out in the city for more than 2 hours at a time.
Oh yeah,
I couldn't,
it's
wiped me
it's
out.
wild. I mean, they drive on the opposite side of the street, like in the UK, and I remember like it took so long to hammer it into my head. Don't look left, right, left when you cross the street. Look right, left, right. And then I remember doing that, hammering that into my head. And then I remember doing that one time and nearly getting taken out by a scooter that was just driving just fully on the opposite side of the street from where it was supposed to be. And it's like, yeah, I mean, people, it's more chaotic. People are just doing what they want, and somehow it works too. And I think that there's an excitement in that as well.
Dude, I almost got hit by a car several times just in London alone, right? I mean that can happen almost anywhere. But I honestly truly believe that every kid in the United States that graduates high school should have to spend 6 months somewhere like India or some areas of South America so you can truly appreciate what you have in this country. So you come back with a more of a respect of the opportunities that you have.
The level of privilege that we have in North America is unreal when you see how billions of people in the world are living. Uh, you or at least I really appreciated the privilege that we have.
But you still have an extraordinary level of privilege, even if you're in India, because you're able to walk through that gate behind that door where the five-star hotel is, if you've chosen that that's what I need to do today, right? And nobody else with you is allowed to do the same thing. So that is what also kills me when I'm in India because I see all these people really struggling. And even if I'm with them, I could always walk through the door and escape that reality if I wanted to, and they can't. And that just eats me up inside.
Yeah, it is very real. Yeah, I mean, just by the design on your passport and the color of your skin, you gain all these privileges, and that stuff is very, very real.
So you said you did 3 months there, which is cool. You stuck it out. You stayed. You made friends. Everything's good. It's finally time to come back. So you get back on that plane. You come back. You come back home, and your parents say, "Okay, Zach, here it is, man. You gotta sign up for school. Dale, let's go do it."
Yes, well, I was signed up already. I think that was also something that had helped. Uh, I applied to university and I deferred for a year, and so they had kind of guaranteed my spot for the next year. So
Well,
I
then
got to
that made
go
it
with no
easier.
responsibilities, and I think that also definitely helped sell it to the folks.
That's fair. So, did you go to UC Berkeley, or you decided to go somewhere else?
No, I decided let's see what it's like over on your side of the country. So I went off to UPenn in Philly.
Nice. That's a great university. It's big, big city. It's a
Yeah, it
lot
was
going on over there.
It was awesome. Philly's a great city. It's no New York, but it's a great
It's not New
city.
York.
And you get some you get the culture, the touring musicians and that kind of stuff who come through New York. Hey, they also hit Philly, but the tickets are cheaper and the rent there was way cheaper, and it was good. But I was
I
wrapped up
hope you
in
weren't.
university
I
mostly.
mean, I hope you weren't a vegetarian at that point, because I mean, let's be honest, the Philly cheesesteak. Like, there are
Oh yeah.
areas of this country, Buffalo. You know, you have a buffalo wing, but you got to have it in Buffalo, right? I went to school like up there, so it's a cliche, but it's named for that because how special that is, right? So
Oh yeah.
hopefully you had your fair share of those Philly cheesesteaks.
I did have my fair share, no doubt. And chicken cheesesteaks became my central interest for some reason. I don't know. More
That's
flavor.
fair.
I find like a low grade beef is a little.
That's fair. No, no, but it's still this. I mean, it's different protein, same experience, right? Like,
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah, on
fair.
a
So
hoagie cooked out of a food truck. And Philly was cool at the time, it was like food trucks everywhere, but not the hip ones that we see uh all over the place. More like how it was in New York, the halal trucks everywhere and the hot dog trucks and that kind of thing we had in Philly. It's not like how San Francisco looks these days where you pay more to get a meal at a food truck than a storefront.
so I'm guessing then you start university in Pennsylvania in the fall of 2010. You said you graduated
In fall of
2008,
2009. Graduated
2009. Okay.
2008. Yeah, yeah, fall of 2009.
Okay, cool. Um, and again, now you're a new experience, new city, no fear, going alone. And I'm guessing that you had it in your head that you were going to do computer science there. What was in your head?
Oh yeah, that was completely in my head. And the thing I had originally been keen on was the dual degree with computer science and business because I was interested in entrepreneurship and stuff. Uh, but I didn't get into that program. I got into computer science only. And I was like, well, I'll transfer into that program. And then I got there and I started doing computer science and saw what the business kids were doing. And I was like, oh, never mind. I'm I'm studying computer science.
Were you still getting into it and excited to get to the 300s? Or did you start finding other things that were more interesting to you?
It was a funny mix. So I got into programming class and it wasn't, it was I skipped the whatever the intro programming class was. So it was the next one, 102 or whatever. I don't know if we use that kind of numbering, but that equivalent. And it was easy and fun because I'd been doing all this other stuff and I had learned how to sort of flail at a keyboard until things worked. And I'd gotten used to that and I'd learned some things from it. But I got into like the first discrete math class where we started doing proofs and that kind of thing, and I just had no idea what was going on. Could not understand even what a proof was, how to do it. None of that made any sense, and I actually questioned. I was I was not doing well on those exams, and I really questioned like, am I actually gonna be able to do this computer science degree? Like, I thought it was this programming stuff, but this stuff just does. is not working out. So I had a big question there, and thankfully I just kind of held on, and eventually the discrete math started making a bit more sense, and then eventually didn't have to do more discrete math, which is good. But I'd even, I think, started to enjoy it by that time. But I really actually doubled down into the computer science classes and started doing more of the upper level classes and enjoyed them, and started even filling my elective credits with more computer science classes. So I was pretty hooked.
That's good. Like I went the BA, not the BS route because of the math. Like Calc 2 pushed my limits and it's just my brain. I was also really immature when I went to school. I mean, I'd like to think I do better now just because I don't know. I always was a year behind. I was always a little immature. So I went the BA route and I just said, I'm going to do the bare minimum amount of math I need to do to get this degree. And so I didn't even take some of the math classes you're talking about.
Oh yeah, and I struggled with the calc too. You know, there was like the discrete math that was more computer sciencey, and then I did 3 semesters or four maybe of calculus, and I was just sitting there like, why? Am I ever going to use this? What's going on? And that was probably one of the biggest hurdles, like you said, to getting the sort of the BS degree. And in the end, does it matter? I think absolutely not at all. Doesn't matter whether you have a BA or a BS in terms of anyone hiring you, or that kind of thing. And now I even know it doesn't even matter whether you have a university degree at all for a lot of folks if you have the skills, which I think is beautiful and wonderful. And I would, I would do my degree again for sure. But I've also hired people and worked with people who have no degree, and I love that there's an industry that where it's not actually needed.
I mean,
Um,
my opinion on that is when I'm looking at a resume, I just want to see that you finished what you started. So I don't particularly care if you have the BA or the 4 year degree, right? I don't even care if you're 4 degrees in something else. I just want to see that if you decided to start that, that you finished it. And if you didn't decide to start that, you started something else that right? So that was the biggest thing to me. I'm happy I have the degree. I mean, my degree's from 1991, right? And I would say the biggest thing I learned from my degree was how to solve problems using code. If I have to look back, right? And that has helped me as technology changes. Like, so what do you think was the biggest sort of takeaway you got from your degree? It wasn't any one given tech or programming language because all that's changed. But I'd like to think that it helped you be a better engineer in some capacity.
yeah, I mean, I think that the computer science fundamentals matter. They do some, but but we're not implementing algorithms. We're not implementing sorting algorithms, and we're not typically um, doing the most hardcore stuff in our day-to-day work as software engineers. I think the thing that I learned that was the most important was actually probably not in my classes. It was I was lucky enough to again get involved with some research, and I worked with people this time who were grad students, PhD students, who really had a real drive for understanding things and learning for the sake of it and doing things well. And that wasn't something I had ever really super learned. I still was kind of in the skater punk mode of like, oh, it's not cool to try hard, and I should just scrape by with the bare minimum. And I think that the important thing I learned was like working with these people who actually were working really hard and and believed in what they were doing, and um, that sort of translated into how I took my academics later as well. But it wasn't something that I learned in the classroom. I would say it was something I learned from working with inspiring people.
So I had the dumbest philosophy in undergraduate school. My GPA is not on my diploma. So I just have to pass. Like,
Yeah.
stupid, right? Like when you think about it. But it wasn't until I got deep into the Go community and started meeting some of the engineers at Google that have PhDs that I really recognized the need for people who were that smart to go down these academic paths so they could build these programming languages and algorithms to handle dependencies. And I got a whole new education that I wouldn't when I got just being around these people, learning how they talk and debate and write things up and the way they do that. And it's like mind blowing to me, right? Um, and I think the other cool thing about the time I've spent in the Go community is just sort of you constantly feel like you're not good enough, right? When you're around people who are just that good, it's you start to feel like, damn, like where am I in this whole sort of food chain, right? But then I got to constantly remind myself, yeah, there's 50% of the people on the planet that are just smarter than me, but there's also 50% of the planet that necessarily isn't. So just be really happy where you are right now in the middle, because there's somebody wishing they were you just as much as you're wishing you were you
Oh
were kind of
yeah.
them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I can think of in any community or pursuit that I've ever been involved with is like the deeper you go into things, the more you discover that you don't know, of course, and the more that you start to be exposed to people who are the absolute top skill level or physical fitness or intelligence or that kind of thing. And so yeah, I think further is, and especially in tech, I've learned that like there are places and there are places for all sorts of different people and skill sets to be in in teams. And yeah, we do need those PhD types writing the compilers and optimizing them and that kind of thing. But there's plenty of space for the people who went to a boot camp and can build web apps. And there's space for those people to learn the skills to do compilers. That's not an easy path, but it can all be done. And I just love that and love to embrace all of the different opportunity and ways that people can collaborate.
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself an average developer. I can work on any sort of business problems and do the integrations, and every once in a while I get a little bit more technical than I need to, but and I'm happy with that, right? Like the world needs a lot more average developers right now than all those. That's where the bulk of the problems. Like, so I'm learning about vector databases now, right? And I'm learning how to sort of work with them, and I'm trying to understand the semantics of what a vector is and all of that. And I'll get to that level, but like I'm never going to build a vector database. Like I'm looking at algorithms today that do the cosine sort of matching, or not matching, but the cosine algorithm that tells you distances. And I'm
Yeah.
looking at the code and I'm going, that's cute. Like, I don't know. I couldn't have come up with that, but I'm glad I see it and I know how to apply it. Right. Uh, and I'm okay with that. I think there was a point in my career where I was really mad that my brain couldn't comprehend that math. And I'm not telling you, I don't comprehend it honestly. If I spend maybe 3 days intense, I probably could, but then whatever, like, is that the best 3 days use of my time? So
Yeah.
um and I'm having this conversation just for people that are listening, because I think everybody goes through this sort of,
Oh
I'm not
yeah.
good enough, I should
Yeah, if you're out
understand that.
there listening and thinking, "Oh, I'm not good enough. I don't know everything." Yeah, it's okay. No one knows everything. We're not
You know what,
there are way too many layers here for anyone to possibly know everything.
you watch the movie Goodwill Hunting, right?
Oh yeah, it's been a while, but
Okay,
seen it.
so one of my favorite scenes in that movie is when Affleck and Will is they're sitting at the construction site, and Will starts talking about how at some point they're going to have kids and the barbecues, and Affleck looks at him and he goes, "I'm going to be really pissed off if you're still here in a couple of years. Like you have this gift, you have this brain, and you're wasting it. Right? You're working on a construction site." And the thought was almost, you're taking a job away from somebody right now that can't do what you do because you're unwilling to do the things that you can do. And how is that fair sort of in society, right? And that's another way I sort of rationalize this. I know I can't be solving certain level problems. So, but there are others that can, and they should be doing that, right? They should be aspiring to, I think, work at the highest level that you're capable of working. Just because there are people who can't get to that level. And leave those other opportunities open for those people. Like, what are your
Yeah,
thoughts around that?
yeah. The thing that really comes to mind for me immediately is like, is let's look at the flip side of that and also say like, it is totally great to work in whatever kind of role that you want. Like, I think that if if construction is the work that someone wants to do, or that's paying their bills, or the work that they can find, like that's great. Not everyone has to be a software engineer. Or whatever's cool these days, because software engineering seems to be cool these days. I think, in my eyes, it got cool around the time where the Social Network film came out about Mark Zuckerberg uh, creating Facebook, and before that, it was cooler to be an investment banker or whatever. I'm not a big fan of status games. I think that work is work is work, and if people want to do anything that's ethical, or at least aligns with their own ethical framework, which hopefully is generally aligned with everyone else's. Like, I think more power to them.
It's 2013. You've done 4 years of university at the University of Penn. Are we graduating at this point, and what are we deciding is going to happen next, Zach?
Yes, graduating, and at this point, I've got really into rock climbing, and like my ambition is, I both have loved computer science, but I'm also having a growing ambition to not work and just live out of a car and go rock climbing. So I have at this point lined up a job at Facebook, and they said, "Well, when do you want to start?" And I said, "What's the latest date I can do?" And they say, "Anytime in 2013." And so we settle on December 16th, which is the last possible date that you could start. And I go and hit the road and go rock climbing. And I'll tell you, at the beginning of December, I came really close to saying, you know what? Why work? I could just live in a car and be happy.
Yeah, but how are you supporting yourself? So, assuming you graduated in May, right? I mean, it's almost 6 months roughly. You have to have some money, Zach. Or
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. The money's running out, and the and the realist side of me goes like, well, okay, if I turn down this job, and what am I gonna do in a
you
few
weren't
months?
worried that the job didn't disappear? I mean, I guess back then, and we're talking again, 2000, what, 13? Um,
2013. The job wasn't going to disappear. It,
uh,
it didn't have any indication of disappearing at that time. Facebook was doing great. It was pretty hot. Tech was doing great overall. So no, I wasn't worried.
this is mind blowing to me. So you're interviewing, you get a job at Facebook. They're like, "We want you," and they're like, "Oh yeah, but you can wait. We can wait to have you." I don't understand that. I would have told you no. We did this because I need you now.
They needed, yeah, I mean, I think it was a bit of a different time. They just knew that they wanted an influx of new engineers, and that they would figure out where to slot you in at the time. But that was actually one of the really cool things that they were doing at Facebook at that time, was their boot camp concept, where you join not with a specific team in mind. They just bring in a bunch of new engineers every week. I think, there are probably 60 of us engineers or something who started that week in December,
Wow.
and they'd put you through this 6-week boot camp thing. And during that time, you would find a team to join.
And where
And
was that located? Because now you have to move, right? It's not remote in
yeah, so
2013.
that was right. So that was Menlo Park, sort of
Back
heart
to
of Silicon Valley,
California.
right next to Palo Alto, back to California. And yeah, I showed up there, and that research that I had been doing in my undergrad was security research. And I got to Facebook, and my goal at Facebook was to work on like large scale systems, high throughput, high scale, that kind of stuff. And what I found out was I could get the intersection of security that I had found really interesting and the scale in a place like Facebook. And so I ended up on a little software engineering team embedded within the security team, who was actually, interestingly enough, reporting to the legal department at that time at Facebook, because it was considered
Hmm.
like a risk thing. Now I think they've restructured and they're part of engineering, actually.
But you got to that there would just happen to be headcount on that team, and you said, "I'd like to be on that team." Is that how it worked?
Yes. Yeah. And that had been really attractive to me, like being able to pick what I worked on once I got the inside view. And yeah, they had headcount and they seemed cool, so I did it. And it was it was through that that I ended up being there several months later when another guy, Mike Arpaia, joined, and he had the vision to create Osquery, which is the agent at the heart of what we're doing at Fleet these days. So, that story kind of starts 10 years ago in 2014. Mike says to me, "Hey, can you help me build this thing that we want to use for our internal security?" And the plan is to open source it. And had always been really interested in the idea of open source, and so got involved with that. And I've since then kind of built my career on open source through this 10-year journey, starting from helping create that project at Facebook.
I kinda wanna hear the story. You said his name was Mike, right?
Yeah.
A story of Mike coming to you, because my first question would have been, unless you already understood it, "Mike, what's the business problem? Like, what are we facing right now that, 1, you've come up with this idea, and 2, somebody's gonna allow us to sort of work on it?"
To be honest, I think I didn't really understand anything about business at that time. So I think he basically just said, "You want to do this thing? It's going to be cool." And I said, "Yeah, of course." It wasn't just that though. It was also, what the pitch was, "Hey, we've got all these Linux servers that we don't have any visibility into, like hundreds of thousands of them. We don't have the security visibility that we need. We've got all these Mac laptops that we don't have the security visibility that we need. And then we've got 20 or 10% of the organization is on Windows laptops where we've bought some tools that work. So let's focus on Mac and Linux where the big visibility gap is." And I think that was compelling.
So I understand the telemetry part of that, but was the security part making sure that the latest patches, certain dependencies, certain libraries, certain things were on these machines?
Yes, it was, but it was also like, let's enable the security team to write queries and rules that look for uh, suspicious behaviors, essentially processes that are making network connections to addresses that we don't know, or that we know are malicious, that kind of thing, or accessing files that seem unusual. And so this agent that could collect the telemetry ended up being hooked up with some other tools that we had internally, which now you typically call this kind of thing a SIM, like security event management system. And we had one of those internally where we could aggregate all the data coming in, and our security analysts could write rules that would trigger alerts when unusual things happened.
So essentially, you had hundreds of thousands of machines sending information to a database, and then you had services that were basically chewing that data up, looking for whatever it was, the flavor of the day, because you could write these sort of generic queries, and then
Yeah.
you could generate alerts.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing dashboards
Oh yeah.
and everything else. And
Yeah,
then
and there were all these
constantly you were like,
internal tools that allowed the chewing through the data and the dashboarding and that kind of stuff.
and I'm sure every week you were like, "Oh man, we should get this information. Oh man, we should get that information."
Yes.
And then you had to build something that allowed you to deploy new agents to hundreds of thousands of machines,
Well,
right?
that was also like there were internal tools there. There were whole operations teams who were dedicated to being able to get software deployed out to those machines and configurations deployed out to that software. So we were able to tackle like a pretty narrow part of the problem, the get the data off the system problem. And we were able to use the internal tools for the deployment and for the collecting up the data and searching it and firing alerts and all of that kind of stuff,
How
which
big was your team? It was you, Mike, and
at the beginning it was Mike and I. It was half of my time and it was all of Mike's time, and then more people brought in or were kind of brought in to work on on the project. There were,
And then that agent was all written in Java or C?
that was written in C++.
Okay.
Yeah. So the
So
agent was C++,
so
and
how
that
long
was
are you there? I'm
so
sorry.
I was
How
there
long are you there?
ultimately. I was there for a pretty short time. I started in late 2013. I left in mid 2015, and what had happened actually was I had said, "Well, this new stuff I'm working on is way cooler than the old stuff." Because we'd open sourced it by then, people were starting to use it. That was really exciting for me, and the internal tools that were closed source and being used by 5 people on the security team, that was less exciting. But the other thing that was getting me was commuting to an office, and this is 2015, so remote work not yet a thing really for most people, but commuting to an office was getting to me, and that rock climbing itch was calling me again. And so I had gone to my manager and said, hey, can I work 3 days a week on this project? And he said, oh, sure. And he went to HR, and they said, no way, we don't do that. um, and so that basically triggered me to quit and hit the road again for rock climbing.
But you had some
And
cash this time, so this is
this time I
dangerous.
had some cash.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
You could go 2 years at this point.
I could have gone 2 years, but then I ended up consulting on Osquery. That manager moved from Facebook to Airbnb. He needed
Oh,
some work done. He knew that I wanted to work part time, and he said, "Well, hey, I can hire you for some consulting work over here because
nice.
we want to deploy the project, and they don't care where consultants work or what hours they work. So let's do that." So I started doing that, and
That was beautiful, dude. That was, like, exactly what you needed.
oh yeah, it
Did
was.
your parents I would have been if I was your parents, I would have said, "Are you high as a kite, dude? You just walked away from Facebook because you gotta go climb some rocks."
Um, Again, my parents they're just very open-minded, which is great. So I don't think I caught too much flack from them on that decision.
I'm sure there were days during the week that you had to be at a meeting at a certain time. I mean, it wasn't just completely, "I'm gonna work exactly whatever hour I want." That
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, most of it, but
Yeah, it turned in I would show up I think I would show up to the office there at Airbnb every 2 weeks or something like that, and spend a day with them in the office, and then otherwise I would just uh write code and ship it.
yeah,
But
that's
I
nice.
didn't do that for super long before I reconnected with Mike Arpaia, who had the original vision for OS Query, and he and I had got to talking about building a company together, and we did that, and we co-founded along with our CEO Jason a company called Collide, where we started writing some code, which was actually a management server for OS Query, the agent. And we wrote that code, and we raised some VC money, and then we
What
kind of
year is that?
pivoted.
Is that
This
like
is
17,
2016, I think, or
16,
17.
7? Okay, and you raised some money, so you did a small, like, angel round?
We raised some money.
Uh,
We even did, I think we called it a Series A at that time. It was like
okay.
$8 million or something.
Whoa, 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 dude, you raised some real money. That wasn't a joke.
Yeah, it was not a joke. Because at this point the OS Query project was being used like in production at Facebook, but it was also being used at Google and at some other really big organizations. And so there was like compelling reason to imagine that we'd be able to build
But
something that would
how
make
long
money.
was it from the time you guys decided, "We're gonna start this company," and you start working out of, your rock that you're climbing, to the time that you start raising some money?
So we did our first. Well, we started with sort of a seed right when we started the company that was based completely off of just like, hey, we're working on this open source project that's popular, and then I think it was about 8 months or a year later, and we're still totally pre-revenue, so it's completely based on hype. Uh, Raising that, I can't remember if it was $6 or $8 million, something like that.
But
Probably
still, it's
says
a
it
lot of
more
money.
chase. Yeah,
And
it
now,
was a good bit of money.
but now the reality sets in. It's not you just hacking now, the 3 of you. Now you have to have a you have to hire people. You got accounting, you got HR, you got this, you got that.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
there was all of that, and it actually didn't go very well. And so we pivoted, we open sourced that was query management server, and we called it Fleet. We called it Collide Fleet, and we open sourced it and abandoned it essentially. And we pivoted to some other stuff that was still pretty much in the space, but not directly related, and it continued to not work super well business wise, and the company was flailing, and ultimately, Mike and I left during kind of a big restructuring of the company, and I went back to climbing and skiing and that kind of stuff, but also really took a kind of a bigger swing at this consulting thing, and really worked to build a business around supporting the folks who had kind of picked up the abandonware Collide fleet and started using it. And I became sort of the sole maintainer of that project, and I worked on Osquery, the agent that was still being managed by Facebook. The project was still managed by Facebook at that time,
So
and
this is
kind of
like
any other.
2020.
This is
I mean, it's
20. This is 2019 at this point.
so you kind of get restructured out. You decide I'm just going to be on my own. But since so many people are using the products and they need help, you sort of found yourself falling back into uh, a small revenue stream, enough to let you still have the freedom to climb rocks
Yes.
in 2019. Which,
Yes.
were you surprised by that, or did it just were you like, damn, this is cool? Like I was able to
Oh yeah.
I created something that's still allowing me to generate sort of revenue.
Absolutely. It was super cool. And the other thing that I loved was like I discovered co-working spaces, and I discovered that I could be living in my van and climbing, and my clients didn't have to know because I would take my meetings from the co-working space, and I could get some actual work done, sitting in a co-working space with good internet and people working around, but I could do it 3 days a week or whatever and that kind of thing. Um
Okay, time
and
out. For those who want to go live in their car now and be outdoorsy, I just have to ask, where are you showering every other day?
That's a good question. I don't think I was showering much. What I was doing was this is in Mammoth Lakes, California, and there's hot springs all around there. I think I was just having a dip in the hot springs, so I perpetually smelled like sulfur. And
So you go to a co-working space smelling like sulfur?
I
Zach,
guess
you're killing
so.
me, dude. You didn't think about that. And then you had to wash your clothes every once in a while, Zach. So
I must have gone to the laundromat. I don't know. Or I'd go. You know what? I had friends. I'd go to friends' houses every once in a while and get a shower and that kind of thing. But like I was just fully
you you
uh,
were not in a relationship, Zach, because
no.
okay, if I go, God forbid, I go 2 days without a shower and I don't smell, and rightly so, right? I'm being told to go take a shower. Okay, so there's no way that you're in a relationship at this point because it had to be interesting.
I was
I could
dating
see
someone
you
in the
now.
Bay Area, and I would
Yeah,
show up back to the Bay Area and get a shower.
yeah,
You
that's it.
know.
So that's how you dated somebody for their shower. It's just. I thought you were going to say, Bill, I got a gym membership for real cheap, and I would just go and use the showers
I
there.
know that's the common move. But I think this is the amazing thing about open source and about consulting is like it doesn't matter what you smell like and what your office looks like. It matters the code that you ship, and it matters the value that that code is bringing to the organizations. And to my great joy, and there was value there, and I was finding clients and customers and gaining open source users and that kind of thing. And what happened was I ended up getting approached just online. Then this is now in 2020 during the pandemic, I got approached, and by the way, back. Like I'm working more. I'm living in an actual house with a shower, probably showering every day and washing my clothes. And
I
I'm
mean, you couldn't
working.
be out anymore, right? I mean, outside
Couldn't
is
be
no
out
longer
anymore.
viable.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I get approached online by Sid Cibrani, the CEO of GitLab, who says like, "Hey, I'm looking for people who are doing open source projects who want to turn that open source stuff into open core companies. And I'll give you some money and I'll advise you on kind of getting this company off the ground. Not give you money,
Wow.
invest."
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and we did that in the fall of 2020. I took that investment, joined up the new company that we formed, which we called Fleet. And we Sid had lined up a CEO. I became the CTO, and we started working on figuring out, how are we going to make not a consulting revenue stream but like a product revenue stream on this. And by taking the philosophy that Sid had pioneered, this buyer based open core, he calls it, that he'd pioneered at GitLab, and bringing that to what we were doing with Fleet. And that's kind
Go,
of what we've done the last nearly 4 years now.
go back to the email that you got from this person. So you recognize the name, or you don't recognize the name.
I think the email was like, "Hey, I'm the assistant for Sid Cibrani, the CEO of GitLab. Uh, he wants to talk to you."
What's the first thing you do? You right click on the email and you start inspecting the headers because you want to make sure this is, I'd be like, no, this isn't real.
It was a bizarre thing because, no joke, that same week I got an email from someone who said, "Hey, I'm the assistant for," I think his name is Shy, who's the CEO of Elastic. That he wanted a meeting as well, and it was like, is there something going on? And I
Did
took these
somebody
two
post my
meetings.
number in a, shower, public shower somewhere?
It was it was absolutely bizarre, and so I took these two meetings, and like the people on the video matched the pictures of of what the people said online. And this is before deep fakes, so it was like, okay, this seems like these are
It came from the
the
right
real people.
domain, right? Came from the right
Yeah.
domain. Nothing's like, but you did that little bit of research.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, you didn't go blind, like because like, you have to, right? You just
Yeah.
say this can't be. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That must make you feel really good at that
Well,
point.
it did. It really did. And this was a time when, we were all kind of cooped up in the house and getting kind of deeply back into the entrepreneurship and working way more, going from kind of uh, two-thirds time consulting to one and two-thirds time startup mode. Way over full-time startup mode seemed appealing. So I jumped in and we did that.
Now, Zach, I'm a little concerned because we're 4 years in, and you have a 4 year sort of history of needing to go climb rocks. So, how are we doing right now? Are we ready to
Well,
sort of slow it down?
I'm actually doing that now. So my role at Fleet now is I'm a tech evangelist. So I'm really focused on the sales and marketing side of things and working directly with our customers. And we actually have, we promoted our director of engineering to the CTO role. And so he's running the engineering organization, and I really get to just focus on the things that I'm most into, working with the customers and promoting the product and deploying it and that kind of stuff, and spend more time rock climbing and everything.
Are you doing any DevRel stuff? Are you on stage also, or is it literally more of a
Oh
customer
yeah.
sup I don't wanna use
It's a
the word
bit of
customer support because it's much
it's
more
a
than
bit
that,
of
but
everything. I do a lot of conference talking. I do, some sort of solutions engineering kind of work, pre-sales, helping people get the software deployed and figure out how to integrate it in the ways that help to achieve whatever their goals are. So it is a bit of everything. And I even write a bit of code for the product itself sometimes as well.
you need people person people who love people to do these sort of roles, right? Like the hedge down engineers, and I'll bring them to a conference every once in a while. And I have to be really careful who I bring to a conference, right? Because you want that personal, I can tell already from your personality, right? Like this role is like you could walk into a room and everybody will just sort of relax. Oh, Zach's here. It's all good. Right. Like I feel that energy from you. I think
Oh,
this role
thank
is
you.
I think this role is like perfect for you, man.
Oh yeah, it's the perfect balance. I get to hang out with the people. I get to help everyone be successful, whether that's internal to our team, make the sales successful, whether that's make our customers successful, whether that's go out in the community and be at conferences and all of that. Like it is really an awesome role for me, and I get to spend more time out climbing and mountain biking and skiing and all these things I've always loved.
What I also like about your background now in this role is you're building a product for a general set of problems for a general set of companies. And one of the biggest problems is when that one customer says, I need this one off. I need this one off. I need this one off. And that's when products start to get out of control because you're not building for the majority, you're building. Talk a little bit about that because you're on the front line of that now. So somebody's saying, I need this, I need that. You got to go back to engineering. But I think you still have the ability to know. You can almost say yes or no right there in front of the client. Obviously, you wouldn't, but you could.
Yeah, I mean, this is a super interesting problem to tackle where for sure people are always going to have custom needs because this is not a simple piece of software. This is like a lot of different business requirements that folks are trying to tackle with this is and they're going to be different needs, but we do need to be careful about what we're developing, that it applies to all our customers and that we're not just bolting on things left and right. And so a big thing that we often do, especially from the solutions consulting perspective, this pre-sales perspective, is we're looking into other tools to help us integrate. So we use things like security SOAR, security orchestration, automation platforms that allow us to, our system can fire webhooks, and then those automation platforms can trigger anything that someone wants via webhook, and you can do it with low code or no code or code. So finding making sure there's really good integration points has been a big priority of our product for a long time, and taking advantage of that to make sure that we are meeting the business needs of our customers is a big thing that we do in that kind of sales, uh, the technical pre-sales role.
But you won't be, do you have a division that will build the, when you have a company, it's like, I don't have the engineering chops to build a little piece of software that the hook is going to execute. Are you also doing some of that for your customers, some consulting work?
Yeah, we do a bit of that as well. Like, we'll bundle in some professional services along with the
Yeah,
subscription to the software. So yeah,
nice.
there's kind of a whole mix of these kind of things.
I love it, man. It's really interesting that this sort of one product idea, this one problem has sort of followed you. Even when you've tried to walk away from it inadvertently, it just keeps pulling you back, right? Like almost 3 times now it's sort of pulled you back, and I find it also super interesting that you haven't gotten bored of it. I would have expected at some point you say, okay, I've solved this problem already. I want to work on something 180 degrees different. I don't want to do this. And maybe that's going to happen still. I mean,
It
you're
could happen,
young,
but we've
so
also, we've evolved into new spaces as well. Like I talked earlier about MDM and getting more into the active management of the devices. That's new. That's something that we just shipped, I think in 2022, our earliest iterations of that, and that's now something where it opens up kind of a whole new world of things that people can do and want to try to do with our software. So luckily, we've got that evolution to kind of ride as new excitement and new power.
so I have to last question because we're way out of time already. But you're a product company, so when are you going to start saying that you're AI enabled?
We've
You
already
have
built our
to.
first AI features, um, and that is effectively, we didn't talk about this much, but the agent allows you to write SQL that collects data off of the system that the agent's on. And I did tell you already that there's this concept of policies where you can evaluate whether the device is in or out of compliance with the security policies or the IT policies or maybe literally the compliance frameworks. And what we've done is we've used AI to help the admins who use our software write descriptions for these policies that they're writing. So they write the SQL, and then AI we found is really good at reading the SQL and saying, what does this do and why? And that allows the admins to put in a lot less effort, but more effectively communicate with their end users. Hey, this query checks for your disk encryption, and disk encryption is important because what happens if your laptop gets swiped off of the table at the coffee shop, or that kind of thing. So we're doing a little bit of AI. I think that AI will have some role here, but our biggest focus is getting the data off of the systems that's timely and that's actionable and that's relevant to the users. And that is going to continue to be about making it really easy to deploy the software and have the software return facts, just the hard facts of what's going on the system. And the interpretation will include more AI, I think, as we go.
I mean, I silly, very silly idea. Like, I want to talk to one of the agents and just start chatting. Hey, how are you doing today, agent? I've been really busy today. Oh my God, I cannot believe what's happening. Right? Like, it's silly, but and no value in that. But I do wonder one thing though. At least in my world, everybody's running Kubernetes. Whether they should or not is irrelevant. I wonder if the idea of an agent for the pod is something that becomes important because when I'm in Kubernetes, it's not really about the node. It's about the services in that pod and the quotas and the limits and the memory and all that there. And I feel like there's a big opportunity there, but I don't know if I'm making any sense or not.
Yeah, no, it is making sense. So the node is going to be essentially the container host, and the pods are going to be the containers running on the host. And it actually it turns out in my experience, people want information from both. They want to know about the state of the node, and they also want to know about the state of the pods running on that node. And so there are multiple ways to do this. You can kind of deploy the agent down into the pods. You can get visibility from the node into the pods with just a single agent deployment. And you can also look at some of the sort of metadata from a Kubernetes API. And this is all stuff that's supported to from that's all this is all stuff that's supported in the agent and the deployments that we do. I would
Nice.
say it's not our central focus, but there is support there, and it's something that we will probably continue to grow over time.
And then that just made me realize about some of the edge computing, right? Like, so we tend to own our ingress servers today, whether it's Nginx or Caddy or something. But I wonder how many appliances are out there, Cisco appliances, that you would also love to get some information about. I don't know how any of that works, dude.
Oh yeah, for sure. And some of those appliances are running Linux and do allow arbitrary software to be installed. And so we do see people run the agents on
Oh,
those.
nice.
Other stuff will be more proprietary, or maybe it's running Linux, but it just doesn't have any way to configure other software to be installed. So sometimes, this is not an effective way to get at that. But there is possibility, and there's actually, some folks are using this for that kind of thing.
Nice, dude. All right. We're so out of time, and I could, as I say to almost every guest, like we could talk for another 2 hours. It's been totally cool.
Oh yeah,
So
really
thank
fun.
you. Yeah, thanks for all this time you've given me. If anybody listening wants to just reach out and say hi or has a question, like what's the best way for somebody to reach out to you, Zach? We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, awesome. We'll put it in the show notes. There's some Slack, LinkedIn, Twitter. It's all there. And Bill, thank you so much for having me. And thanks, folks, for listening.
No, man, this was super interesting. If you ever find yourself in Miami, you better reach out, dude. I want to take you out for a drink or two, man. My wife and I love to host people in Miami and show them around. So I don't go to
Awesome.
California anymore. But if you find
Alright.
yourself in Miami, you better I better not find out you didn't ping me.
Love it. Will do. Never been to Miami, but gotta go someday.
Yeah, man, you gotta go. I mean, we don't have it's flat here, so I don't know if you're gonna like it. Like below sea level flat.
I could do
So
flat for a few days.
okay, that's fair. That's fair. This is Bill Kennedy and Zach signing off from the On Labs podcast, and we hope to see everybody again real soon.